We are Kim and Pat Messier, authors of Reassessing Hallmarks of Native Southwest Jewelry and Garden of the Gods Trading Post. The following discussion of Awa Tsireh's influence on the metalwork made at Garden of the Gods Trading Post is derived from those two books. In 1929, a businessman named Charles Strassenbach opened a trading post on the southwest edge of Garden of the Gods Park in Colorado Springs. He employed Navajo and Pueblo Indians from Arizona and New Mexico as silversmiths, weavers, and entertainers. The Native Americans who worked for Strassenbach in the summer of 1929 were photographed on the porch of the trading post for this hand-tinted postcard. William Goodluck, Navajo, was one of the silversmiths who brought his family to the trading post in the summers to work. His wife Yakenispa demonstrated rug weaving. William's famous father, Hosteen Goodluck, worked at the trading post only during the summer of 1929. Severo Tafoya, or Ka Ping, from Santa Clara Pueblo, worked for Strassenbach as a silversmith for decades. Strassenbach had a shop mark made from the Tewa Thunderbird logo he created for his business, and his tagline in the 1930s was, "Where better Indian silver is made and sold." Metalwork made at the trading post was marked with shop marks including the Tewa Thunderbird mark, handmade by Indians, and either solid silver or sterling, and occasionally NS for nickel silver. In the early years, the metalwork made at the trading post utilized typical tourist designs and stamps such as arrows, thunderbirds, and whirling logs. Notice how the stamp work dominates the design area. Then about 1930, Strassenbach hired an artist who had become well known for his easel art. Awa Tsireh, from San Ildefonso Pueblo, worked as a dancer, painter, and metalsmith at the trading post into the 1940s. It should be noted that the common pronunciation of his name is Awa Tsireh. However, his family confirmed to Diana Pardue, chief curator at the Heard Museum in Phoenix, the proper pronunciation is Awa City. Awa Tsireh's metalwork utilized an artistic approach, was aesthetically pleasing, and meticulously made. He worked in silver, copper, aluminum, and nickel silver. To our knowledge, Awa Tsireh only made metal work during the time he worked at Garden of the Gods Trading Post. His influence would define the design of the jewelry made at the trading post thereafter. His metalwork was as exquisite as his paintings. This aluminum tray with a pie crust edge has a knife-wing figure floating in a plain background. The hallmarks include the Tewa Thunderbird shop mark, handmade by Indians, and his individual hallmark of his name. This elegant copper tray utilizes repoussé and stippling as the major design elements. Awa Tsireh's influence can be seen in the metalwork made by the other artists working alongside him. This copper plate exhibits many of the same design elements that Awa Tsireh used, but is not as refined. This butterfly pin was made by another of the silversmiths at Garden of the Gods Trading Post. It was elegantly made with repoussé detailing the body and uncomplicated stamp work. Other silversmiths who worked at the same time as Awa Tsireh were Charles Montoya, also from San Ildefonso Pueblo. Navajo David Talaman made this Gato-style bracelet while working for Strassenbach. A Navajo silversmith whose initials were BA made this bracelet. These examples of work made at the trading post utilize clean, elegant designs and stamp work, a reflection of the style of Awa Tsireh. Silver bracelets of this style by Awa Tsireh were quite popular, and many were made. It was cast as a narrow ingot and hammered into a square bar. The bar was stamped and filed while still flat, then bent into the final shape. The two bracelets on the left are by Awa Tsireh. The bracelet on the right with the turquoise settings is not by Awa Tsireh, as it lacks the finesse of his work. A copper crumb tray was made in the shape of a Pueblo rain cloud by Awa Tsireh. The design is comprised of repoussé, stippling, and uncomplicated stamp work. This amazing large copper tray, 14 inches in diameter, with a design of two eagle dancers by Awa Tsireh, shows a painterly approach in the application of the stamp work. The design on this large copper tray by Awa Tsireh is reminiscent of a feather design used on pottery by San Ildefonso artists, including Maria and Julian Martinez. The designs on this copper bowl by Awa Tsireh are rabbits adapted from membrace pottery designs. A totally unique piece by Awa Tsireh is this brass bracelet with rocker engraved designs. Typically, rocker engraving is seen on pre-1900 Navajo silver or Plains Indian silver. Awa Tsireh made this V for victory pin after 1941. Two opposing doves form the letter V. It is simply elegant. Perhaps Awa Tsireh's favorite design motif was that of skunks. He frequently made them into silver pins, or stamped them into bowls and trays, and painted them in his artwork. This is the only known lithograph made by Awa Tsireh. It was facilitated by Charles Strassenbach about 1938, and only 25 were made. They originally sold for $10. Awa Tsireh died in 1955 at San Ildefonso Pueblo at the age of 57. This photograph was taken by Charles Strassenbach. We thank Garden of the Gods Trading Post for allowing us to use photos from their collection.